This is the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast. Great to have you with me. I'm Stephen Mansfield. This is the podcast where we look at our times through the lens of faith and leadership, character, and history. I'm glad you've joined me. I am recording this a few days before July the 4th, 2026. As you know, that's the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence that declared our nation free and independent. It's a big day, and I hope it goes well. I am being cowardly, by the way. I am in our Nashville studio and not our D.C. studio because, baby, it's going to be about 105 on the mall on July the 4th. And I'm a heat wimp raised in Europe. So I'm grateful that I'll be in Nashville, which will probably be like 5 degrees cooler. Of course, by the time you hear this, all of that will have been decided. But I am hoping that nobody's harmed and there aren't heat strokes and things of that nature, given the celebrations on the mall. My focus is not so much on the day, especially in this podcast, which you won't hear until after the day. My focus in this next year, from time to time in this podcast, is going to be guiding you through some things you can easily digest that will help you get an accurate, a faith-oriented understanding of American history. What happened? What were the tensions? What were the challenges? How did faith inform it? Again, this is a podcast that takes faith seriously in our generation and in the past. What does it mean to us? How should it inspire us? How is this a heritage that ought to live in us now? That's what I'm going to focus on. And I want to tell you that I'm a realist about these things. From time to time, around Thanksgiving, around Christmas, around the 4th of July, holidays, big events, organizations and authors like me tend to issue giganto book lists. And ain't nobody going to read them. And I want to be a realist. I really want to give you some resources that you can enjoy with your family, perhaps, in this next year, because I think it's an entire year of celebrating the 250th of our nation. And I want to be a realist and help you enjoy it, digest it, and be changed by it long term. By next July 4th, by the 251st July 4th in American history, I'd like for you to be more inspired, have had more fun, have learned more, be more in love with your country, and also perhaps see its foibles more clearly. That's part of being a patriot. And so I'm going to recommend some things that you might digest. Now, I want to tell you that I'm unusual. I'm not an academic historian. My doctorate's in history. I guest lecture. I write. You know what I do if you listen to this podcast at all. I don't have to give you my resume every time. So I certainly respect academics. I've lectured at, many of the best universities in the world from time to time based on, whatever, hot topics in the news or books that I've had come out. So I love universities and I'm grateful for academic historians. But I also believe in popular history. And popular history is the history that's written or produced in a documentary or done enough movie that helps you understand the past in an inspiring and powerful way. I like movies that do a good job with history. I like documentaries. I like special interviews and things of that nature. I like, of course, books, and not just heavily academic books. Most academic books don't get read. It's just true. Books done by university presses, books that are heavily academic, they don't get read. There was a stat years ago that books by one of my favorite historians, David McCullough, who wrote Truman, who wrote John Adams, who wrote 1776 and other great books. Most of those books were bought as gifts, but not read. They were given to the uncle, given to dad on Father's Day, but they weren't actually read. I want people to actually digest things. And by the way, I'm grateful that some of the major histories in our time are fairly academic, are fairly dense. You can think of some books that have been written recently about Steve Jobs and others, big, thick suckers. I'm thrilled that a book about Michelangelo did really well. I'm delighted by that. I'm thrilled that a book about Grant did really well and got on the New York Times bestseller list. That makes me unbelievably happy. But I'm also a realist, and I'm aware that most people won't read those books. So I want to recommend some resources in this podcast to get you started. And the reason I say that I'm not an academic historian is that I want you to get the story however it has to come. If it's a doc, if it's a conversation around a fireplace that's accurate, if it's a trip to history lands, to theme parks and to historical sites, great, do it. But I'm a realist, and I want to help you get started gently, okay? And then I'll recommend some things from time to time in this podcast throughout the year. So here we go. 3 different recommendations for you, and they are very, very diverse, and none of them are heavily academic just to get you started. Number 1, I want to recommend that you watch HBO's John Adams. Now, it's available on HBO now. You can go, if you get HBO Max, all of that, you can watch it now. It's there in their archive section, not their hot new movies and videos, but it's there for you to watch. And you can also purchase it as a set, and I believe you can also get it in some of the services that allow you to pay for individual episodes. I love this miniseries. Paul Giamatti plays John Adams. Laura Linney plays Abigail Adams. I want to tell you straight up, the production values are unbelievable. I have seldom seen such good acting. It moves you to tears. The acting, especially between Giamatti and Linney, is unbelievable. It follows John Adams. It's based somewhat loosely, as it has to be, on David McCullough's book, John Adams, but it captures beautifully a lot of the tensions, a lot of the conflicts, a lot of the dividing lines, a lot of the disappointments of the founding era that John Adams would have lived through. He was one of the framers of our early history. He was our second president. He was a representative to the Continental Congress from Massachusetts. He was one of the main authors, along with Jefferson and others, of the Declaration of Independence. In fact, Jefferson wrote it and Adams edited it, is probably the way to think about it. Franklin was also involved in some others. But in other words, John Adams is a major player in our early history. And what I love about this miniseries is not only the amazing acting. I mean, if it was just about something else and not about our founding, it would just have been magnificent. You won't believe the total number of heavyweight actors in this thing is pretty amazing. But it's also very accurate. It's not going to lean heavily in either direction politically. You're going to feel the American Revolutionary era through John Adams' experience, which was often disappointing. He was often sidelined. He was often mistreated. For example, he defended the British soldiers at the so-called Boston Massacre of 1770, when the British soldiers fired on colonists and killed some of them. He was the lawyer asked to defend the British soldiers and was vilified by his fellow citizens in Boston, etc. So I got to tell you, it's just so good. I believe it's 8 episodes, all of them, typical television length, about 45 minutes. And I just think it's a great thing. A caution for parents: almost everything in the entire series can be seen by children. There is a sweet and beautiful indication of a sex scene between, believe it or not, John Adams and Abigail Adams when they haven't seen each other for a long time and they reunite in Europe. No body parts are actually seen, but there's a lot of leg and a lot of unlacing and a lot of indication of what's going on, and there's some rhythm, if you understand what I'm saying. So I would show it to as I did, by the way, show it to my children in their late teens. But children younger could see everything. I don't know that you'll want them to see that. I'm pretty much careful about sex and children when it comes to film. Also, language. You don't have anything to worry about with language in this. But there is one sex scene that you should be aware of and just be careful about the ages of your children. I would love for my 9-year-old grandson, who's very precocious and very interested in American history, I'd love for him to see it. I would have to excise that scene because it's going to be more about sex than he's been taught. You understand what I mean? Okay, so there we go. John Adams, HBO product, really, really good. And if you get inspired by it, you want to know more about John Adams, the obvious book to go to is David McCullough's book, John Adams. You'll really love it. It's thick, it's powerful, it's well-written, it's moving, it's inspiring. You'll be changed by it. The second thing I want to recommend is unusual. And stick with me once I tell you what the title is, because I understand that it's unusual. And that is that I believe that the best sources for history are original sources. What did the person write themselves? What letters did they write? What were the original documents? But I realize most people aren't going to read that stuff. And I'm not being cynical or angry or haughty. I just know that most folks aren't going to sit down and read original documents. So I want to recommend that you have this in your house. And by the way, if you love it, give it as a gift. It's called America's God and Country, Encyclopedia of Quotations, and it's by William J. Federer, Federer, pretty simple, Federer, Federer. And this is the kind of thing you're not going to sit down and read straight through unless you're a geek like me. But I'll tell you what I do. What it is a collection of quotes from American history that show the faith, the patriotism, the devotion. You're going to have everything from the faith statements in the original Ohio Constitution, and then Douglas MacArthur quotes, and every founding father and people through American history. Easy to read, brief little 1-sentence, 2-sentence introductions, and then the quote, and maybe a sketch. And that's it. It's beautifully bound, beautifully done. I'm guessing it's in the $25 range. I'm looking at it. I've got it here on my desk in front of me as I record here. It's nicely hardbound, quality, very well done. I didn't look up the publisher before I came on the air, so let me tell you real quick just so you can look for it. It looks like it's done by Fame Publishing, Inc. I don't know that company. It may be owned by a larger house, but whatever. You'll find it on Amazon. I highly recommend it. Let me tell you what I do with books like this. Now, this is very personal. I normally don't disclose this kind of thing, but I always have the book on the back of my toilet. I always have the book on my back of my toilet. And by the way, I don't spend a lot of time in the bathroom. Don't be hassling me. Some of you will write me jokes later and start recommending laxatives and stuff. You're all so crazy. But books like this that have little quick sections to read, and each entry is, it's 2 inches. I love reading, in between strokes of shaving or while I'm on the toilet or, sometimes I'll stand there while I'm drying off and I'll read a section of that. It's a book you can read while you're doing other stuff. I know some people who, I know a housewife, for example, dear friend of mine, who every day has lunch alone at her house. She's a housewife. She's a busy mother. The kids go off to school. The husband goes off to work. She stays home. She's also a writer, but she has lunch alone every day. And she keeps a book just like this right there by her dining room table where she fixes herself, an elegant sandwich and whatever she has to drink. And she reads for 30 minutes and she'll finish a book like this in 6 months. Just through lunches, because she's reading a couple, 3 pages a day. Find a way to do it. It's not the kind of book you sit down and read, but I highly, highly recommend it. The other thing that's nice about having it around is that, for example, when you watch John Adams and you think, well, what did he say about faith? What else did he say about religion? What else did he say about the country and God's purposes and so on? You're going to find accurate quotations documented by John Adams. You can go and look up A for Adams, and you'll find that section. Or if you watch a movie about MacArthur, you can look up what he did or said, or did Patton say anything, or whoever you're interested in American history, scientists and authors and presidents and founding fathers and whomever. And by the way, it's a great little way to get introduced, because if you don't know who Richard Henry Lee was in the founding area, but you're, let's say, traveling through Virginia and you hear his name, you can look him up. You'll get 2 sentences of introduction and some quotes from him. I like it. I like it a lot. In this year, even though I've read it and used it as reference for a long time, I'm going to have it around my house. I'm going to buy some and give them away. So I highly, highly recommend that. Okay. Again, America's God and Country, Encyclopedia of Quotations, and the book is by William J. Federer. Highly recommend it. Again, notice that I haven't given you heavily academic books. I've given you a mini-series and I've given you a quotation book. But this is the way you can digest this stuff and begin to learn in a relatively painless way. I'm a big believer in self-education. I'm a big believer in finding unique ways to learn and get information. I don't think you have to just sit down with a stack of 72 books that are all 1,000 pages each. Most people won't do it. And that's why we have so much ignorance of our history. Let's find painful ways to make this happen. Now then, I want to recommend a book series that deeply influenced me. It's going to send professional historians over the edge, but I like it. It's got some things in it that I wouldn't have done, but I think it's really well done, especially for people who are oriented towards faith, especially for Christians. And that would be the majority of my audience, although I've said many, many times, grateful for my Muslim friends who are listening, grateful for my atheist friends, especially the one who's so vocal from Australia. Love you guys. Stay with me. But there's a series of books written by Peter Marshall and David Manuel. Now, you'll recognize that word Peter Marshall. I'm not talking about the game show host. The original Peter Marshall was the Presbyterian pastor who was a Senate chaplain. There's actually a movie done about him, I believe in the 1950s, called A Man Called Peter. And it's beautifully done and really, really, really powerful presentation of this man's life. The man I'm talking about, though, is Peter Marshall Sr.'s son, Peter Marshall Jr. And he and David Manuel wrote a book that I read about the time I went off to college, or maybe it was just after college, and it was called The Light and the Glory. And I'd never read anything like it. It was relatively accurate history, but the authors reflected in the book and said, I wonder, could it have been that Christopher Columbus was attempting to do the following? And then they'd quote from Christopher Columbus's journals. And I was shocked. I'd never seen it before. If I read this right after college, and I think that's actually when I read it, I would have already done a degree in history and literature, and I would have already read about Columbus. Nobody would have told me that Columbus said that the Holy Spirit inspired him with the navigational plans to sail to the New World, or that he was trying to introduce the natives of the New World to the gospel of Jesus Christ, etc., etc. These quotes are in the book, and then the authors feel the freedom to say, now, maybe he had a commission from God. Maybe he was trying to do something good. Maybe it went amok. They admit in the book that the various voyages of Columbus ended in some devastation, no question about it. And of course, our modern neo-Marxist society makes a huge deal out of that and detracts from Columbus entirely. By the way, I'm speaking as a guy with a Native American heritage, so it's not like I'm insensitive to that focus. Now, all of that to say, Peter Marshall and David Manuel wrote these really wonderful series of books. The first one is The Light and the Glory. The second one is Sea to Shining Sea, taking on a later era of history than the founding era. The Light and the Glory deals with the founding era. It's going to deal with Columbus. It's going to deal with Jamestown. It's going to deal with the Pilgrims, the Puritans, Boston, etc. Sea to Shining Sea is going to deal with more of the founding era, and then you're going to get to the early 1800s in Sounding Forth the Trumpet. I'm going to say those titles again for you in case you're writing them down, but we'll have them in the show notes. The Light and the Glory, Sea to Shining Sea, and Sounding Forth the Trumpet, Peter Marshall and David Manuel. These read like novels. They have accurate history in them. You'll have to get used to the somewhat reflective style of the authors. They're thinking about it. They're wondering aloud about things. Could it be that this was intended? Perhaps God intended this. They'll think that way. This sends historians over the edge. But I'm telling you straight up, this is not objective academic history. It's accurate history. What they report of Columbus is true. The quotes they do from the Puritan fathers and the Pilgrims, etc., all of it's true. And then you have a little bit of their reflections. Peter Marshall was a Presbyterian pastor, David Manuel, an author and publisher. I like these. I like them a lot. I recommend them to you strongly. They would be great to read in this new year. They'd be great to read aloud as a family or husband and wife or whatever. They'd be great for a Christian studies group. And there are study guides that accompany them. I've actually written some of the forwards for some of the versions sections of this book. I really, really like this. So let me just go through the whole list again real quick, and then I'll sign off. John Adams, HBO miniseries, really good. America's God and Country, Encyclopedia of Quotations by William J. Federer, hardback. I think it may be available in paperback, easily accessed on Amazon. And then The Light and the Glory, Sea to Shining Sea, and Sounding Forth the Trumpet, Peter Marshall and David Manuel. Now, most of you crazies will probably have this all consumed by the end of the summer. Great. I'll be back before the end of the summer with some recommendations. Enjoyable, fun, pop some popcorn, watch a mini-series, read it when you're on the toilet. I know that'll live with me forever. You guys will never let me forget that. And then enjoy some novel kind of books. I mean, I don't mean novel in that they're strange, but they're in the tone of novels. I think you'll really enjoy this. Get started. Dive in, jump in. There's stuff you don't know, and this is a fun way to start. Have a great 4th. I hope you already had it. By the time you listen to this, you will have already lived the 4th of July, 2026, and we will keep rocking. Enjoy American history. It's a wild ride, and I think this is going to change you.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator in international media. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.